In this video, we're going to learn how to factor trinomials with the leading coefficient of 1. That means the number in front of x squared is actually a 1. If that number is not a 1, it's a little bit more complicated. We'll cover that in the next video. So all the examples you're going to see in this video, the x squared will have a coefficient of 1. Now I'm starting first, the first thing with c being positive. That means this number is positive. And when that number is positive, that tells me both signs are the same. They're either both positive or they're both negative. So for example, if I said factor x squared plus 5x plus 6, because this one is a positive 6, positive, that tells me we're going to have the same sign. So either both numbers going to be positive or both numbers going to be negative. Now when you look at a plus 6, you say, how do you get a plus 6? Well, it could be plus 6 times plus 1, could be negative 6 times a negative 1, could be a plus 2 times a 3, or it could be a negative 2 times a negative 3. That's how you get a plus 6. So we can do it the long way, and that is try every one of these combinations. Now x squared, to get x squared is going to be x and x. And I'm going to try these numbers. Let me try the plus 6 and plus 1. So let me try this option and see if that works. Well, I know x times x is x squared. That's good. I know 6 times 1 is 6. That's good. The question now, do we have plus 5x? And the way we test that, we multiply the inside, plus 6 times x, that's 6x, and 1 times x, which is what? That's 1x, and when you add them, what do we have? We have 7x, not 5x. That's not good. I need to make sure this number is actually that number. Well, if I try the negative 6 and negative 1, I'm going to have a negative 7x. Not good either. Let me try the 2 and the 3. Does that give me the 5x that I need? That's a 2x. That's a 3x. When you add them, what do we have? 5x. Perfect. So this is the correct factoring. Now, notice I could be here for 5-10 minutes before I find the solution to that. That's too much work. Is there a different method I can get to it quicker and faster than just trying all these options? And the answer is yes. Let's take the same example we just did. And if I take the plus 6, let me list the factors of plus 6. Or plus 6. And let me list the sum of the factors. So the plus 6, you get plus 6 by multiplying what? 6 times 1. What's the sum? 6 plus 1 is 7. That's not good. I want it to be 5. Could be negative 6 times a negative 1. The sum is what? Negative 7. That's not good. I want it to be 5. Could be plus 2 times plus 3. When you add them, what's the sum? 5. Bingo. So my factors for that is going to be x, x, and it's plus 2 and plus 3. And it doesn't matter which one you write first. You can write the plus 3 first and the plus 2 second. It really doesn't change the answer. Again, if you want to simplify the problem even more, less chances, less choices here. When you look at this sign, if this sign is positive, that tells you both signs are the same as the one before it, which means both of these will have to be positive. The negative will never work. So I can eliminate that option. Let me try another one. Factor x squared plus 5x plus 4. Again, this sign is positive. That tells me the signs are the same. Same sign. Same as the one before it, actually. That's what that means. So both of these factors are going to be positive. They can't be negative because the one before it is positive. So when I write the 4, the options for 4, the factors for 4, these are the factors. I'm not going to waste my time on the negative ones because I know they're going to be positive. 4 is actually 4 times 1 or 2 times 2. What's 4 plus 1? 5. What's 2 plus 2? 4. Since I want my answer to be 5, these are the correct factors. So I can write that as x plus 4 times x plus 1. Let's try another one. Factor x squared minus 10x plus 16. Again, the first place I look at is this spot right here, the plus. That tells me the signs are the same. Same sign. Which means both going to be as the one before it. Both going to be negative. Here's the 16. The factors and the sum. The sum of the factors. 16 could be negative 16 times a negative 1. When I add them, the sum is negative 17. Not good. I want it to be negative 10. Could be negative 8 times a negative 2. When you add them, what's the sum? Negative 10. Perfect. I want it to be negative 10. So when I factor that, it's going to be x and x. And the two numbers are, doesn't matter again where you put the 2 or the 8. One is negative 2, the other one is negative 8. Factor y squared minus 9y plus 20. Again, the same sign. Both factors will have the same sign as that one. So both will be negative. So 20, again, has to be negative numbers. Could be negative 20 times a negative 1. That's a plus 20. That'll give me negative 21. Nope. Could be negative 10 times a negative 2. That's a plus 20. But when you add them, that's a negative 12. Not good. Could be negative 5 times a negative 4. When you add them, that's a negative 9. Perfect. So there's my two factors. So now when I factor that, that's y minus 4, y minus 5. Factor minus 8x plus x squared. Now when I see a problem like this, I don't like the x squared to be lost. Me personally, I like to write my expression in descending power. So I'm going to start with the x squared first. That's a positive. I don't have to put the plus. That's the negative 8x. And the sign in front of 12, we just didn't put it there, is actually a plus. So I like to write that this way. And again, I look at the coefficient of c. That's this guy, this sign. I look at that number. That's positive. That means same sign. Same as this one. So both of them will be negative. So here's the 12, the factors, and the sum. Negative 12 times a negative 1. That's plus 12, but when you add them, that's a negative 13. Nope. Negative 4 times a negative 3. That's a 12. When you add them, negative 7. Nope. Negative 6 times a negative 2. That's a 12. When you add them, negative 8. Perfect. Because I want it to be negative 8. So when I factor that, x minus 6, x minus 2. Factor x squared plus 3xy plus 2y squared. Notice we got x squared and y squared. So when I factor this, it's going to be x and x and y, because y times y is y squared, x times x, x squared. The problem is the 2 and the 3. Now let's take a look here. This is positive, which tells me both signs are the same. both going to be the same as this. So both signs will be positive. And the only other thing I have to pay attention to is the 2 and the 3. Here's the 2. Let's list the factors of 2 and their sum. The 2 is actually 2 times 1, and the sum will be 3, plus 3. And what do you know? You want it to be what? Plus 3. That's it. So one of the numbers is 1, the other one is 2. Positive and positive. So when you write that, clean it, you don't want to put the plus 1. You go x plus y, x plus 2y. Let's try another one, just like this one. And again, every example we did so far, it was a plus here. The C was always a positive. In a few minutes, we're going to switch that to a negative C. So factor P squared minus 4PQ plus 3Q squared. Again, this I know is going to be P and P, and the Q squared is going to be a Q and Q. We'll deal with the numbers shortly. I see a plus sign. That tells me both signs will be the same. So both going to be the same as this one. So both going to be negative. Negative numbers. So let's take the plus 3. List the factors of it. And the sum. Again, I just finished saying both numbers will have to be negative. So plus 3. There's only one option to get a plus 3. That's a negative 3 times a negative 1, or plus 3 times a plus 1. But since we're not using the plus, that leaves us with one option. Negative 3 times a negative 1, when you add them, that's a negative 4, and that's what you want it to be, negative 4. So my answer, there's a 1 here and there's a 3 there. The negative already here. So my answer becomes P minus Q and P minus 3Q. Now the question becomes, what would you do if this sign is negative? How is that going to change the problem, or the way we've been factoring? So let's look at that case. Factoring x squared plus bx plus c, where for c negative. So let's take an example. Factor x squared plus 2x minus the 3. Well, when you see a minus here, that tells you you will have different signs. That means one is going to be positive, one is going to be negative. So the x squared, when I factor that, is going to be x and x. What are you going to put here? That's the question mark. But we know one of them is going to be positive and one is going to be negative. Different signs. I have no idea which one's which. And my job to find them. We're going to do the same thing. We'll take the negative 3 and we're going to list the factors. We're not changing anything. And their sum. The only thing we're telling you that the signs will have to be different. So to get a negative 3 could be a negative 3 times a positive 1, or it could be a positive 3 times a negative 1. The signs will have to be different. What's negative 3, when you add them here, what's negative 3 plus 1? That's a negative 2. Nope, I want it to be a plus 2. What is plus 3? Add to it negative 1. That's plus 2. And that's what you want it to be, a plus 2. So you can see now the plus goes with the 3 and the minus goes with the 1. X plus 3, x minus 1. Factor x squared plus x minus 6. Again, we have a minus here. Different signs. So one is positive, one is negative. Different signs. Doesn't matter what that sign is. Negative 6, the factors, and the sum. Well, could be negative 6 times a 1, but when you add them, that's a negative 5. Could be 6 times a negative 1. When you add them, that's a plus 5. Could be negative 2 times a 3. When you add them, that's what? A 1, and that's what you want it to be, a plus 1. So these are my two numbers. The minus goes with the 2. The plus goes with the 3. Let's try another one. Factor y squared minus 3y minus the 10. Right here, different signs. So it's y and y, and one is positive, one is negative. Different signs. Let's take the negative 10, list the factors of negative 10, and their sum. Could be negative 10 times a plus 1, but that's a negative 9, doesn't match. Could be 10 times a negative 1. When you add them, that's a 9, doesn't match. Could be 5 times a negative 2. When you add them, that's a 3, doesn't match. Could be negative 5 times a 2. That's a negative 10. When you add them, that's a negative 3. And now we do have a match. The minus goes with the 5. The plus goes with the 2. Factor. X squared minus 12 plus x. Tricky. Notice they're not really in descending power. So what I need to do is rewrite that problem. Because initially when you look at it, you go, why is this problem in this section? That's a plus. But when you rewrite the problem in descending power, oh, that is a minus. That's what we've been talking about when this sign is minus. So when this sign is minus, that tells me we have different signs. I keep writing that just to remind you. So I'm going to have x and x, again, one positive, one negative. And it doesn't matter if you put the positive first or the negative first, so I'll switch them here. Because I did the plus first, the negative second, I'm flip-flopping. It doesn't matter. As long as I stick with these numbers, the minus goes with the 5, the plus goes with the 2. Which side you put them, it really doesn't make a difference. There's the negative 10, the factors, and the sum. And soon enough, you probably noticed by now, you know 12 and 1 probably not going to work out. I'll put it there. Negative 12 times 1, that's a negative 11. 12 times a negative 1, that's plus 11. That doesn't work so far. 6 times a negative 2, that's a 4. That doesn't work. Negative 6 times 2, that's a negative 4. It doesn't work. 3 times a negative 4, the sum is what? Negative 1, doesn't work. Minus 3 times a 4, the sum is 1, and that's what you want, to be a 1 here. So these are my two numbers. Again, notice the minus goes with the 3. It doesn't matter which side. There's the minus. The 3 goes with it. There's the plus. The plus goes with the 4. Let's factor x squared minus 5xy minus 14y squared. Again, this sign is negative, which means different signs. But I got x squared and y squared, so I know I'm going to have x, and I'm going to have y and y. And since there are different signs, one is positive, one is negative, and there are some numbers here. I'm not sure what these numbers are. That's when I go back and I look at the problem. I go, let's look at the negative 14. Let's list the factors of that and their sum. Negative 14 could be what? Negative 14 times 1. But when you add them, that's a negative 13, not a negative 5. It's not good. It could be 14 times a negative 1. But that only gives me a 13, which is not a negative 5. How about negative 7 times a 2? When you add them, that's a negative 5. And perfect, that's what you want it to be, negative 5. So the negative goes with the 7. The positive goes with the 2. X plus 2y, x minus 7y. Factor a squared minus 5ab minus 24b squared. Just like the previous one or the one above it, you have a squared and b squared. You have a negative signs, which means different signs. So I'm going to have a, and since you get b squared, that's b and b. There'll be some numbers here, and we have different signs, one positive and one negative. Now let's take the negative 24, list the factors of that to see what the numbers are, and find their sum. I know 24 and 1 is not going to work, so I'm not going to waste my time on it. How about 12 and 2? Negative 12 times 2, that's a negative 10. If I switch the sign to 12 times a negative 2, that's a plus 10. That still doesn't work, because you want it to be negative 5. 24, could it be 8 and 3? How about 8 times a negative 3? That's a 5. That's good. Not perfect, but we got the 5, not the sign. So switch the signs. Negative 8 times a 3. When you add them, what's that? Negative 5, and now we got the numbers. It's negative 8 plus the 3. So the negative goes with the 8. The positive goes with the 3. So a plus 3b times a minus 8b. Let's make the problem just a little bit bigger. How about this one? Let me just switch it. I forgot to write factor. Factor 3x squared plus 6x minus 24. Interesting. When I started the video today, notice what I wrote there. Factoring trinomials, that means 3 terms, we have 3 terms, whose leading coefficient, that's this number, is 1. Why is this problem here if that's not a 1? Well, I didn't screw up there. The reason that's there because I'm going to combine this section with the previous one. Remember in the previous video we did the greatest common factor. We can still do that here. If you look at the 3, the 6, and the 24, all three of them are divisible by 3. Because you can write this 3 times x squared plus, I can write that 3 times and 2x, 3 times 2 is 6. The 24, I can write that as 3 times what? 3 times 8. So you can see they have a 3 as the greatest common factor. So if I factor the 3 out, what's left? X squared minus 2x minus the 8. Now, don't get excited, we are not done. Now I can factor this. That's why this problem here, because this piece, the inside here, fits this one. Oh, the wrong one, where is it? It fits this topic. Factoring trinomials whose leading coefficient is 1. Notice 1x squared right here. So if I factor that, I know it's going to be x and x, and because this is a negative, that tells me the signs are different. One is positive, one is negative. And let's see what the numbers are. The negative 8, the factors of that, and the sum. Negative 8 could be negative 8 times 1, but that would give me a negative 7 when you add them. Not good. Could be 8 times a negative 1, that will give me a 7. Still not good. Could be negative 4 times the 2, that will give me a negative 2, and that's what you want it to be. So my numbers are negative 4 and plus 2. The negative goes with the 4, the positive goes with the 2. You'll be surprised how many people just to factor the 3 out and they stop. When the problem says factor, that means factor completely. This is not complete. It is factored, but it's not complete. You have to continue with that till you can't factor it anymore. Let's try another one. Factor. Y to the third negative 9y squared minus the 10y. And again, when we start factoring, we're talking about x squared, not cubed, squared. This one cubed. That means we're going to do extra work. If you look at the 3 terms, we can factor a y out of them. If you factor one y, you can't take any more than a y. That's your greatest common factor. If you take a y out of each one, what's left in this one? 2 of them. This will be 1 y left there. I already took the y out. There's the negative 10. Now can I simplify or can I factor this anymore? This sign is negative. Again, different signs. That means when I factor that, it's going to be y. This will be y and y. One is positive, one is negative. So I'm not paying attention to this. I'm trying to factor this now to this. Let me look at the negative 10. The factors of negative 10 and their sum. Could be negative 10 times 1, and what's the sum? Negative 9. Perfect, on the first try. So here we go, the negative goes with the 10. There's the minus, that means a 10 here, and the positive goes with the 1. Maybe a couple more examples. Factor 3a to the 4th minus 21a to the 3rd minus 24a squared. We're going to look for the greatest common factor first. The 3, the 21, and the 24. All three of them are divisible by 3. So I can factor a 3 out. And that's not the only thing. Let's look at the a's. This has 4, this has 3, this has 2. I can take 2 of them out. So what is left in the first one? The 3 is gone. 2 of the 4 8s are gone. That means there's 2 of them here. There's the minus sign. 21 divided by 3 is what? 7. You have 3 a's. You already get 2 of them here. That will leave you with 1 on the inside. Here's the minus. What is 24 divided by 3? That's an 8. And you have 2 a's, but you already factored them out. No more a's left there. That's your greatest common factor. Now let's see if we can factor the inside. Again, that's a negative sign, which means my signs will be different. So the 3a squared, leave it alone. Now let's try to factor what's inside the parentheses. I'm going to have a and a because you have a squared here. Different signs, that means one is positive, one is negative. And now I need to figure out what the two numbers here are, then the problem is over. There's the negative 8. The factors of negative 8 and the sum of them. Let me start with negative 8 times a 1. And when you add them, what's the sum? Negative 7. I didn't mean it to be that quick. I'm just lucky here. Because that matches that number. So one try and I was done. Once you have that matching number, you're done. There's your factor. There's your two numbers. The minus goes with the 8. So there's the minus with the 8. There's the minus. There's the 8. The plus goes with the 1. And now we just factor this problem completely. One more. Throw another trick at you. Negative x squared plus 9x minus the 14. I'm not a fan of negative. So the first thing I will do, if I solve this problem, is factor out a minus 1. When you factor a minus 1 out, it's basically change all the signs of these. What's left is x squared minus 9x plus the 14. The minus sign in the front, or the minus 1, is going to change all the signs on the inside. And now try to factor that. Notice this is a plus, that means same sign. Same as the one before it. So there's the minus 1. This will be x and x. The signs are the same. They both have to be negative here because that number is negative. So the 14 could be 14 or negative 14 times a negative 1. They have to be all negative, but they add up to negative 15. That's not good. Negative 7 times a negative 2, they add up to negative 9. Perfect. So it's negative 7 and negative 2. The only thing I will do here, there's probably not a math book that will leave the minus 1 in the front. So you can just take the minus 1 out, just put a minus there, and write that x minus 7, x minus 2. And again, as I said in the previous video, factoring is really the most important piece of Algebra 2. So make sure you get your factoring to a good level, because that will make the rest of the semester a lot easier. Any questions before I shut the video? Nothing?